If you felt stuck trying to lose weight, you're not alone. Enter Weight Loss by Hers. It's designed to support you in reaching your goals. And Hers now offers access to an affordable range of FDA-approved GLP-1 medications, including the Wegovy pill and the Wegovy pen. With Wegovy at Hers, lose up to 20% or more of your body weight when combined with diet and exercise. It helps you regulate your appetite, eat less, and keep weight off. Plus, Wegovy is the first GLP-1 available in a pill, so there are no needles needed. Everything is 100% online through Hers. You'll connect with a licensed provider who will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your medication is delivered right to your door. No insurance necessary. And it doesn't stop there. Weight Loss by Hers goes beyond medication by offering access to 24/7 messaging with your care team and tons of in-app lifestyle and nutrition tips like recipes, meal plans, fitness videos, sleep content, and more. Even better, with a range of affordable GLP-1 options, Hers makes it simple to find an approach that fits your needs and your budget if eligible. You'll get a treatment plan personalized to you and unlimited dosage changes as needed. It's weight loss designed to work with your life. Ready to reach your goals? Visit forhers.com/women to get personalized, affordable care that gets you. That's forhers.com/women. forhers.com/women. Weight Loss by Hers is not available in all 50 states. Wegovy is the registered trademark of Novo Nordisk A/S. To get started and learn more, including important safety information, Wegovy clinical study information, and restrictions, visit forhers.com.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
Imagine for a moment if all of the things that are in the way of you becoming the person that you wanted to become started with the questions you were asking yourself. What if it's just simply that you're not looking at life through the right window? Or maybe if you are, you're looking at the wrong destination. What if the journey internally is about stepping into a power of emotional sobriety, is about moving from survival mode into adaptation, is reclaiming your identity? But most importantly, how do you dig yourself out to become you in the way that an archaeologist might? Well, in today's episode, that's exactly what we're going to talk about with the amazing Kristen Crabtree. My friend, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, same. I'm so excited for this because I think that we're in a place and time right now where people are really seeking a deeper level of identity and understanding. So for those listening who don't know you, and this is their first time being introduced, why should they listen to our conversation together today?
Yeah, because there's a couple of things that are kind of radical that are going to change your life. My basic package is moving people from trauma to truth. And when I mean package, it's like the way I tie things up with a bow, or adaptation to truth, both of those. And I use a framework that I developed while finding my true self. So this is not an academic thing. It is learned and applied from real life. And it is the archaeologist, the artifact, and the architect. And so through that process, you're able to really uncover your truth because you are the only person who knows the way to get to you. So I hate self-help. I hate personal development because all that implies that there's something wrong with you. And really what I have found is that stripping away rather than changing or modifying or adding is really what's going to lead you to happiness. And I have a couple of key methods for doing that too.
One of the funny things is I actually also help. I hate self-help and personal development. I think one of the things, especially early on, I'd see like guys like Tony Robbins, and I would see guys like Brendan Burchard and Marie Forleo and whoever it was at the time. And I think to myself, these people have no idea what's going on in the world. But then you kind of learn about it and you go, wait a second, actually, there's some value here. There's something that I can take from this. And then you walk down these paths of different therapeutic approaches, or do things like I did, where you go to all of the AA, NA, SA, ABCD, all of the acronyms, and you just kind of sit and you think, and it's like, wait a second, what I'm getting so much of here in all of this is when I see people who have really created a trajectory of growth, it's because they started with themselves. And what they're really doing when you're in these spaces, which is crazy because you don't see it until you see it, is they're kind of giving you permission to do the same thing, which I think a lot of people need. What's been your journey into this? How did you get from where you were to where you are right now?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you the short version of the victim story, the trauma story. You're welcome to ask details, but I'm also sort of sick of telling it. So I was sexually assaulted at 13, raped at 15. That is significant because that feeling of inability to keep myself safe led to a 22-year psychologically abusive marriage where my previous traumas were weaponized against me. And so I forgave a lot of manipulation, control, gaslighting, blame shifting. What else can I say? For 22 years until there was pretty much nothing left of me. And when I left, and this is really important for people to hear who are in that fog, when I left, I didn't leave because I had clarity. I didn't leave because I had a plan. And if you're waiting for clarity and a plan, it's not going to happen. My image in my head of leaving was crawling out the door on my hands and knees and into my car. Now, is that what it looked like? No. But is that what it felt like? Yes. And I left in a place of fear, unknown, lack of safety, all of that. And sometimes you just have to face that abyss, and that bear that's chasing behind you is scarier than the abyss in front of you.
Yeah. What that's in the guise of going from survival mode into adaptation and into really learning and understanding who you are. And I've always said, like, the assimilation process of becoming yourself and the new adaptation, like, that's really the hardest part, because when you're in survival mode, and I talk about this a lot, like, I grew up in one of the most abusive homes that you could imagine. And I have an ACE score of 10, a learning disability, all of the things that I've talked about over the years. And it's crazy when you have this moment of reckoning and you're like, wait a second, the space of my life that I'm in right now, this thing that I believe is reality, is a survival mode adaptation so that I can just make it through the day. And it's wild how so much of that is buried in kind of the worst parts of you. I don't know if this was your experience, but I kind of go and I look back at periods of my life and I think to myself, like, I don't recognize this person, whoever this is, who is 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs a day, lying, cheating, can't make the business work, never shows up for himself, in relationships that are basically relationships that he had with his mother. Like, all of these things, they were survival mode. And then you move over in this place of like peace and calm and regulating your nervous system. And you go, wow, I don't even recognize what that is or that experience. But so many people believe it's their identity, but it's not. So how does trauma and prolonged stress, how does it create these masks that we wear, these roles that we have, and create this space where we think what we're doing is safe when it's really not?
Yeah, so I also want to highlight a word that you said. You actually used the word buried, and that's what my process was about, is about. So yes, everything really about, like, people use the word identity as kind of as if that's what we're trying to get to, but actually for me, identity is all of those layers, all of those adaptations. And they're actually very natural, normal things. They're to keep us safe and loved and secure, accepted. So these adaptations are not necessarily things to be ashamed of or feel guilty about once you start to realize that they're there. They're there for a good reason. And even people who haven't been through the family experience that you've had, who were born into some blessed family that doesn't even really exist, because I'd love to meet it if it does. But even that kind of situation, you're still putting on masks. You're putting on masks to adapt to, your job and your training and your kids and your spouse and all of that. So the process that I went through was truly a process of digging or excavation. And that's why I came to liken it to the role of the archaeologist. The story there is like, how did I get to there? From that person crawling on hands and knees out of the house. The first couple of months that I left were consumed with me consuming anything on any material on narcissistic abuse. I didn't know that I was being manipulated and controlled and blamed. I didn't know any of that when I left. And so finding out that that's what I was going through, I had to reaffirm constantly that it wasn't me. And there's actually a book called It's Not You that is brilliant, because you keep doubting yourself. You're still controlled by that person even after you've left. And after about 3 months of, I am not exaggerating, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd either put one of those audiobooks on, or I'd go on a circle support group for narcissistic abuse. I would be on that while I was getting ready for work. I would go on it during my lunch walk. I would start it as soon as I got off work, and I would listen to it till I went to bed, because if I didn't, I wouldn't believe that I wasn't the problem, So after about 3 months of that, I remember this really vividly. I was in my kitchen, and I was about to press play, actually, on It's Not You for like the third time. And I stopped and I said, you know what? I'm kind of done with this. I realized that a lot of the people in the support groups were staying stuck in their victim story. And I don't know how to get out, but I don't want to be there the rest of my life, And so I opened my Audible app to see if there was something else I could listen to. And there was a title of a book called Becoming Supernatural. I knew nothing about the book. I knew nothing about the author. His name is Dr. Joe Dispenza, or Dr. Joe, as everybody calls him. And that book started the process of changing my life. Now, his book is not about digging and excavation, but what came from his work was a person who could start to shut down monkey mind enough to hear her truth. And once I did that, I'd been to a Dr. Joe retreat. I had come home, I was sitting on my sofa, and I said, what am I, out loud to my true self is what I call it. What am I supposed to do next? And I heard loud and clear immediately, go find the book you wrote in 1999. I didn't remember writing. Well, I remembered writing the book. I didn't remember what the book was about, and I barely remembered writing it. So it definitely wasn't like a conscious, logical kind of thing. I'm a digital hoarder, so I found it in my backup drives. I opened it, and the first chapter was made up of 8 exercises. And the first one is called Who Am I?, which is actually now sort of my home. I call it foreplay in my book, and it's also on my website. And that exercise, combined with the other 7, made me realize that what I had created back then was really a process of excavation, of digging through the rubble. So I didn't use that model or methodology of, archaeologist, artifact, architect back then in 1999. I started to realize that's what I was doing as I was doing my dig.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that happens a lot, and I think that it's so difficult to, in the beginning, not be consumed. And I went through that as well. I mean, once I found Dr. Filletti's research on ACE score when, I was 29, so, 11, 12 years ago now, it's all I did. It's all I consume myself with. And I never really anticipated the outcome of it would be, this podcast and coaching and speaking and all those things. It was just like, I have to find the rhyme and reason to why my existence is what it is. And I think that's what so many people go through. And they're just constantly in this place of trying to understand how they got to where they are. And there's like this always deep-seated question, I think, that people are trying to answer. And while it may have variance, I think it kind of always sits in this place of like, how do I fix this? How do I fix myself? How do I fix this problem? And what I came to realize very early on in my healing journey was, it wasn't that I was trying to fix myself. It was me trying to answer this question about like, who am I actually? Because I think I know people who go through viciously traumatic experiences, they lose identity. They lose who they are. And I've said for years, like, the backside of childhood trauma is the theft of identity. And that's true for a lot of different traumatic experiences. That could be a house fire. It could be losing a career. It could be ending a 20-something year relationship. I mean, there's so much of our identity that gets intertwined and intermingled with our other experiences of life, generally more so the negative than the positive. And so I'm reading all these books, going to all these seminars, paying for these programs, getting all these certifications, just doing this massive deep dive into this foundational understanding of trauma and its repercussions, but also the post-traumatic growth healing journey, and really trying to understand it. And underlying through all of it, it was always like, how do I fix? How do I fix? How do I fix? And then I figured out the truth of it was like, no, it's about owning who you are. And it's answering the question about who am I? And I think that's the question that people should lean into. I know that's a huge part about what you talk about. I didn't have the words for it probably 10, 12 years ago, how I do now. Obviously, that comes in the knowledge and in the learning and in the own personal growth. But if people are in this place and they're where you were, standing in the kitchen, listening to Audible, realizing like, wait a second, there's something deeper here. I'm asking myself the wrong questions. I'm trying to understand who I am more. Where do they start that process? Because it sounds like you had a light bulb moment. I think I did too, but I think maybe we can guide some people and kind of push them towards understanding how to get that question.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I approach it in my book, I'm going to start there, but then I'm going to give some more like tangible, you can do this as soon as you get off the podcast kind of things. But the way I approach it in my work is I give people information so science, metaphysics, philosophy, I give people information that they can then use, whether they, whatever resonates with them. Like I'm always telling people, I'm not the expert. I have some ways to help you hear yourself, but ultimately you're the expert. So I don't give all this information and say you have to use all of this. I give information and it sort of qualifies the person to, when they do their dig, to be able to look at things and say, okay, is this, in terms of artifacts, is this part of my authentic self, or is this part of my adaptation? And so the artifacts that you're digging up do that. How do you get to the artifacts? Through my process, you get to it through a lot of questions and a lot of exercises. And again, my book is like filled with about 100 questions per section, and there's 4 primary sections and 20 to 40 exercises per section. So it's a lot. You're not supposed to go through all of it. I mean, you can, but the idea is one question will be like, oh yeah, I need to look at this, and another one won't. So the excavation is really all of these questions and exercises that you can use to hear your truth and hear who you really are, hear what's authentic versus what's an adaptation. And then from that, you're able to build what I call a jig. And the jig is, so in carpentry, for example, a jig is something that the carpenter will build before they start building the chair. And the jig is there to help them build it more efficiently and more accurately. So that every, chair leg is the same size and fits into the right hole and all of that. So it takes a little bit of time to build up front. But the beauty of it is once you have it, decisions can be made instantaneously. Like there's no pro-con list. There's none of that because your jig is based on your truths. It's based on your passions, your values, your morals, the things that really drive you. And once you know those and you have them very clear in this tool, you can then, look at, oh, okay, so I got this job offer. It's for twice what I'm making now, but it's going to keep me in a cubicle where I'm not interacting with people. All right. So that matches, a financial goal, but it doesn't match at all, my truth, which is in my jig. So I wouldn't be in alignment, which means I would be hearing from my true self. And so, so the voice, the way to know that there's a couple ways you can know that you're not living in alignment with your truth. So one is, I believe, okay, so our truth, or I'm going to use true self. That's my language, but whatever, the authentic part of you. So your true self doesn't have a way to text you. They don't have a cell phone. Sorry. So they can't send you a text message. So what they do instead is they talk to you through your feelings, so your emotions. When you're faced with something like this job offer, okay, so you lose a job, you go, to the job interview and you're just like, this just doesn't feel like the right place to work, but no other job offers come and they offer you the job. And so you take it. So you ignored the first message. And then you start to feel dread whenever your boss walks by. So that's the second message. And then you start to feel anxiety and heart palpitations as you drive to work. So that's the next message. And then you start getting an illness or problems with your marriage. And so that's the next message. And then if you don't listen to any of those, your true self is going to hit you over the head with a 2x4. And that's just the way it works. So if you're in that pattern, if you're not living in a place of peace, equanimity, motivation, and drive without any external effort, if you're not living there, then you're not living in alignment with your authenticity. Because that's the other thing. Once you are living in alignment, you don't need motivation. You don't need discipline. It all just flows. So yeah, I kind of got on a tangent, but that's it.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to start that process of like getting into the place of answering this question of who am I? And I wrote a note as you were talking because it's something that I found to be incredibly true. When I was ignoring those signals, I was working a job that I hated. I was in a relationship that wasn't working. I was not taking care of myself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, none of the ways. I found myself constantly in negative self-talk. I was always beating myself up. Nothing I ever did was good enough. I could not seem to do things the right way. And on the backside of that, because I was ignoring all these signs, all these signals, all these markers, and you talked about this idea of the true self hitting you with a 2x4. Well, that came for me in the way of 5 panic attacks a day for about 8 months to almost a year, where it was crippling, where it was so bad that I couldn't function. Like I was losing business. I was sick. I couldn't sleep. I had massive insomnia. It was a really, really dark place to be in. And it wasn't until I was driving across country, I was on my way to move to Portland, Oregon, so I could go work with the therapist to whom to this day is still like my guy. And I was laying in a hotel room in the middle of nowhere, Utah. And it was like $60 for the night. And I was dead broke. And I was like, I had to stay in the cheapest hotel. And it was disgusting. So I'm literally laying on top of my freaking clothes in this hotel room. And as I'm laying there, I'm listening to this meditation. And I'm just trying to calm my nervous system because I'm in this crazy adventure where I've just made this decision to really walk down this path of trying to figure out and architect my life and be like, this is who I am and this is where I'm going, where I realize, oh, if you lie, you have panic attacks. If you lie, you're doing it because what we talked about earlier, you're in survival mode and you believe lying is an adaptation to navigate the world, you're going to have panic attacks. If you lie because of all these things and you're not showing up, you're not taking care of yourself, you're forcing the discipline, you're forcing the habit, you're forcing the career, it's going to come. You can't avoid it and you're going to pay the taxes on it. But what's so fucking hard about it is you're sitting here, and I know people are hearing this conversation and they're like, yeah, easier said than done. And I think that one of the really difficult parts is that moment where you decide. And people always say, well, the decision comes in the moment where staying the same is worse than the pain of change. And I get that. Like, we're not talking anything no one's ever heard before. But there's a nuance in that moment, because it's in that space where what you're actually doing is you're choosing yourself. And I think that's the hardest thing for people to understand, especially in the midst of a traumatic experience or on the backside of a traumatic experience. It's like, hey, you're actually allowed to fucking love yourself enough to do something different. And maybe that means putting yourself first, leaving a relationship, going to Joe Dispenza. I don't know what it is, but this is where people get trapped. How can we help people? Two-part. One, how did you get yourself untrapped, I guess, to begin with? And then how can we help people do the same?
Yeah, I love.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.
This topic, and I'm really deep in it right now for a very personal reason. So the first step is to have an understanding of why you're stuck, because you may know I'm in a bad place, but you may be unable to break out of it emotionally or logically anyways, right? So what's that sticking thing? So, and this is not, new news, but it is important news. And that is that we live in a loop. The loop is we have a thought. The thought creates an emotion. The emotion is a feeling. The feeling releases a chemical. That chemical causes a behavior, which causes an experience, which goes back to the thought. But what I came to realize, which is like, it was transformational for me, is that I was a junkie. So I was a junkie to the cortisol and adrenaline that I was getting when I was in my marriage, and to the oxytocin that I was getting from the trauma bond, and the withdrawal of dopamine. Like, that was the chemical cocktail that my body was used to. Okay, so you get out of that marriage, but your body is still addicted. It's still a fucking junkie. And it needs its drugs. So where does it go? It tries to find its fix, right? So, okay, there's a couple things that could happen. If we're talking about a relationship, you get into another relationship that's exactly the same, different person, same thing. Or you spin out. You ruminate. You think, you think about that trauma. You think about what that person did to you. You think about how, bleh, bleh, like all that stuff. And the reason you do that is because you need your fix, because your mind doesn't know the difference between something real and imagined. So if you're thinking it, your body still thinks you're in it. And so you get your chemicals. Woo! Then your body can calm down again. So even if the chemicals are like bad, they're what your body knows. It's familiar, and that's what it wants. And it's not your body is just trying to keep homeostasis, and it's just trying to keep you safe. And so your body is not being bad. But what this means is we have to become emotionally sober. I stopped drinking when I left my marriage. I've been sober now for over 2 years, and the addiction to alcohol was so much easier to kick than the addiction to these daggone chemicals. I mean, I swear to God, they're way harder to kick. And so becoming aware that you truly are, it's not just modifying your behavior. It's not just becoming aware of the emotions. It's not just, okay, journal and, get it out. It's not that. Your body is physically, biochemically addicted to these, and you have to break it. I have some tools for that, but you have to break that.
Yeah, you do. And it's wild how true that is. And people don't recognize that and understand it. I think one of the worst things that we've done as a culture, as a society, and this is universal, this is not like exclusive to America, but everywhere, because I've been around the world and back again. Generally speaking, almost unanimously across the board, we do not appropriately teach people how to understand their own biochemistry. And when people understand that they're actually having a biological experience, that changes them. Because when you understand the dopamine and the cortisol and the epinephrine, and when you understand why your amygdala does this and your hippocampus does that, and you walk through the understanding of the prefrontal cortex and growth and from literally the way you eat to the way you sleep, to what you consume, to the way you have sex, to the way you spend money, it is all chemical. And people don't understand that. And they're like, why do I keep having the same behavioral pattern? Why do I keep repeating and doing the same thing over and over? I said I would never date that person again. I wouldn't spend money like this. I wouldn't not invest in myself. I would stop eating junk food. I would take care of myself. It's like, you're an addict. And it's subconscious because you have not yet come to this place where you're sitting in front of it and you have a cognizant understanding of the biochemical experiences that you're having. That was the biggest aha for me, was looking at people and relationships and money and food. And I was addicted to everything. Like I've never been shy to be like, I'm an addict, because it's true. I'm one decision away almost on a daily basis from destroying my entire life, And that's just true because I know who I am. And being able to utilize tools like I have, whether it be my coach or my therapist or journaling or meditation, going to the gym, trying to eat as clean as possible, not drinking, not getting high every day, not, all of these things, they're actually tools to make your life better. I think it's also really important that you have to have a goal. There has to be something that pulls you forward, that requires you to raise the standard of who you are. Because I think about the people who, it's like when you see the 50-year-old guy in the club, you're like, dude, what are you doing here? This was 25 years ago. You should have stopped being in here. Why are you still here? Because they haven't yet let go of who that identity was to become the person that they're supposed to be. So you talked about tools. I have a ton of them. I think people need tools, but I think people also hear tools and like, fuck, I got to do another thing. Why don't you talk me through the process of why they actually work first, and then let's get into what they are.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a pretty current real example of me falling off the wagon, because I thought I had a very humbling experience recently. I thought that I was kind of free of my addiction, meaning the chemicals of emotions. So I left my marriage, and then I lost my job. And then the same week that I found out my cat had cancer, IBD, and kidney disease, my stepson, who was an adult with autism and epilepsy, had a self-inflicted accident and died. And then my cat proceeded to get sicker and sicker and died. And then a month later, I found out my dog had hemangiosarcoma, which is cancer of the inner lining of the blood vessels, which I've had 2 dogs die of. And they literally just one day, like all their blood vessels explode. And I had 7 months. Usually you don't know the animal has that until they die. For, life reasons, I found out, but I lived for 7 months in a state of hypervigilance, watching every moment to see, is this a moment that she's going to pass, and how can I, live life to its fullest and be with her and all this stuff. And I had already come to a pretty nice state of peace and equanimity in my life by this point, because she died 2 weeks ago. So I was already kind of there a number of months ago. And I thought, a little bit, egotistically, like, oh, I've arrived. I figured out how to, kick myself with this, chemical. And when she passed, I realized all of a sudden I had nothing in my life from my past, like nothing, absolutely nothing. And that is good and bad, because my past was not great, but there were things in my past, like my dog and my cat, and, things that were great. And now all of a sudden I have nothing. And so I had no more stress. I had no more anxiety. So I wasn't getting my chemicals again. So even though trying to think of the right word, I experienced her dying process with as much perspective and calm and peace as possible. She had a great last 7 months. I had a great last 7 months with her. So there's no guilt. There's no, regret. Like, none of that is there. She had as peaceful a death as she could possibly have. And yet, about 4 days after she passed, I spent my first 4 days feeling lots of gratitude for her, and I can talk about why or not, but I realized just how grateful I was for her for a gift that she gave me. But about 4 days later, I'm sitting there spinning. Is there anything I could do? Right? Little monkey brain. But I caught it because, you learn how to do that, doing this work. And I caught it. But I still was like, oh my God, okay, I want my chemicals. I want my addiction, right? I want my drugs. So how am I going to not do this? And, there are a lot of different tools, and I had to pull out like 7 of them before I could calm down enough to kind of let it pass. One of the things that I did after that, because I was so humbled, I'm like, okay, so I'm still back where I was 2 years ago in some ways. I actually told a friend of mine who kind of knows my work and, what I'm doing with my life. And I said, I could really use your help on something. And he said, what? And I said, so, I'm fine with emotion. I'm fine with sorrow. It's fine to be sad that my dog passed, right? It's great to weep and all of that. But the spinning out part, no, that's the drug addiction. And you can hear the difference in my voice. So next time I'm doing that, just say, you're being a junkie. You need your fix. Where are you going to get it from? And he started laughing and he's like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. So, just having the ability to catch yourself sometimes and to, look at it with a bit of humor, because it is kind of funny, once you're able to step back a little and see what's happening.
So when you get there, which I think is wildly important because again, it's about being cognizant and recognizing. But I want to go deeper because I don't think we touched it enough. Like when we look at tools, which I want to walk down this path of, why are they working? Like, what is the thing that's happening where it's like, man, I actually see the change. What is that? What is taking place in that space?
Why do they work? Okay. So they interrupt so there's that loop, the thought, emotion, behavior, experience. So the tools are there to interrupt some part of that loop. And there's different tools kind of depending on where you're at in that loop. But that's what they do. They interrupt it. They stop it. They press pause long enough for you to at least see what's happening. Maybe not change it yet, but at least see what's happening. So that's what the tools do.
Yeah, and I think the pause button, I teach my clients this. Every single person I've ever coached always knows this. The piece is in the pause, right? Because we talk about the addiction to all the chemicals, to all the things that are happening, to the chaos, whether self-inflicted or otherwise. And the only way you can move through that is in the pause, is in taking a moment and getting your nervous system regulated. Because if you do not do that, you are only always going to be on a path of self-destruction. And then you're going to get back to this place where, like, I guess this is who I am. But along that process, there's in the transformation, right? Because if you look back at your life, even a year from now, if you look back at your life a year ago, you're going to look at your life and go, wow, that's a totally different person. 5 years is the same, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. Now, you get to choose who you get to be. This is the part that I think is so fascinating about our human experience. Statistically, I should be dead or in prison. Your zip code is a better indicator of long-term success than almost anything else that's measurable. And I grew up in one of the worst areas of one of the worst cities in America, at the least during the time that it was. And it's kind of making its way back to that right now in Indianapolis. And so I have friends who are dead. I have friends who are in prison. I have family who are in prison for life. I have family members who are dead, the whole gamut of things. And I've been in trouble a lot. I've gotten myself into some very sticky situations. But there's always been this part of me where I was like, there's something else here. And I kept having these like revelations. It was really this space of being like, no, I know there's something more. I'm meant for more. I'm destined for more. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. And then suddenly it started to turn into this thing. And I realized there was also this process of self-reclamation. It was like I had to sit here and be like, I am taking me. I'm letting go of everyone who always told me what I can or cannot be. And I'm letting go about it. I know it's a huge thing that you talk about. Let's dive into that a little bit more, because I think people hear stuff like this and they're like, I'm ready to be me. And they get trapped because now that's when the work starts. I think this is my personal view on it, just because, well, I've coached over 3,000 people, had millions of people listen to this podcast. I have a pretty decent understanding at this point. I wouldn't call it mastery, but I have a pretty decent understanding about human nature. And I think that the moment that people come to the decision of, I am going to be me, that's actually where the work begins. All the other work is like precursor. What's that path? How do we walk that path? How do we get people into that space of now they're ready? Now it's scary, but let's do it anyway.
Yep. Yeah. So we talked at the beginning about, thumbs down to self-help and personal development. And I am on the same page with you. And what I call it is the process of self-revelation to self-reclamation. So for me, self-revelation is remembering your truth, and self-reclamation is designing the you that is in alignment with that truth. And so you're claiming that true self. So yeah, how do you start that when you're going, oh, okay, I'm willing to do this, but it's really scary. The first thing I say is it's really important that it doesn't become something you dread. Right? Because if it's something you dread, you're not going to do it. That doesn't mean it's not work. I mean, it is work, right? But it should be something that you want to do because it feels right. So not it feels good, but it feels right. And for me, what that looks like is, my personal experience was that I did these questions and exercises, but my pace wasn't always binging. Like there may have been days where I was like, or weeks that I was like, okay, I'm going to binge and do, as much deep dive as I can. But you have to give yourself the space to design a path that is more conducive to your nervous system. There's the wandering path, there's the scenic route, there's the, I want to get to the destination on the freeway. And you can start on one and shift to another. You just have to commit to yourself to be true, to listen, and to be willing. If you do those things, even if it's like 30 seconds a day the first time, your truth starts to pay attention because it knows you're paying attention. So it starts to trust you and you start to trust yourself. And that's when momentum can build. So it's really that first commitment to doing it, even though you may not know what the it is. And the it can take a lot of different forms. For me, it was the exercises and questions. But there's other paths to get to your truth.
Yeah. And I think one of them is, I dare you to stand in front of the mirror and look at yourself in the eyes and be okay with the reflection. Because if you can get there, that's where you know that you're actually being who you are. Because you can't lie to yourself. Like lying in bed at night with your head on the pillow is where the truth comes out. And you can't escape it because, again, that pause. Now, while the peace might be in the pause, so is the chaos. So is the rumination. So is the, holy shit, I am not living my life as the person that I'm supposed to be. And that's a really scary place to be because now you're in this consummate battle. But the closer that you can move and getting into that place of acknowledgement of this is my truth. And again, I've looked at life kind of segmented into these 6 different areas: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, and sexual. And I think you have to be truthful in all of those areas all of the time if you truly want to embrace this idea of self. If you really want to be this person who moves from the survivor mode and always being stuck to this person who's like, this is who I am. I'm living my truth. This is my best version of myself. And I think that can be really difficult because it's scary. And it also requires you to let go of a lot of who you are. And I think one of the areas that people also tend to get stuck is in this space because they're like, all right, I'm going to do all this, but what about all the identity that I'm leaving behind? What do people do with that?
It's interesting that you talked about your model of the mental body, emotional body, physical body, spiritual body, financial body, and sexual body, because my book actually also breaks it down into the first 4 that you mentioned. The original book also had financial and something else, and I took that out for a variety of reasons, but your model reflects very much the same sort of analysis that I found to be helpful. So you said about leaving the identity behind. What do you do with that? So, I honestly didn't have that problem because once I could hear who I really am, like none of that mattered, it was, and, that doesn't mean that let me speak in the first person. It doesn't mean that I don't still put on a mask from time to time because we go to a corporate meeting and we can't dress in our hippie clothes. We have to, look a certain way. Or, you're meeting a friend's father who is very different politically than you. So you might have to, kind of wear a mask to, be in that space. But the difference is, you're wearing a mask. So like you're intentional. Not just like putting it on and not even knowing you're putting it on. So it's Halloween and you put on the corporate mask and then you go home and you take off the corporate mask and you know that was a mask that you were wearing to adapt to a specific environment so that you could be heard and listened to and help people who expect a certain thing. But that doesn't mean it makes you inauthentic. Because of the awareness and the intention, you're still perfectly authentic.
One of the things that I want people to do if they feel called to, because of our conversation, is to come and reach out and find you. Before I ask you my last question, how can they learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah. So if you've been listening to this conversation and been thinking, oh, I want to be a part of that, I have a link that you can go to. It's u2.0.com, YOU, the number 2, the word point, the number 0.com. That is honestly just a place to schedule with me, and it's free, and there's no sales pitch. I'm not a coach. I just, my truth wants me to get people on a path to their truth. And so if in a half hour or so I can help do that, then my truth will be very happy with me. The other thing you can do there is download a PDF on emotional sobriety and how to achieve that. If scheduling with me is overwhelming, you can also go to my Paramour Paradox project, which is paramoreparadox.com. And I'm sure, Michael, you'll have a link to that, for them. But those are the two places.
And guys, of course, if you go to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com, you'll find all that information and more in the show notes for today's episode. My last question for you, my friend: what does it mean to you to be unbroken?
I'm magnificent, and so are all of you. You just forgot. So being unbroken is remembering your truth of your magnificence, your brilliance. And I cannot believe I say that about myself now, because I used to be suicidal. I tried to kill myself, all that stuff. It's amazing when you really do remember how magnificent you truly are. It's awesome. So for me, that's what it means to be unbroken.
Yeah, brilliantly said. And for those of you today who feel like they need to step a little bit closer to their truth, maybe you need to do so in connection with someone close to you. Share this episode with them because they may need it too. I appreciate you being here, my friends. Kristen, thank you for being here as well. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see you.
Most people don't realize how much their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making billions, pulling details about you from public records and the internet, and then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might sell just credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together, at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/remove. Protect yourself now at aura.com/remove.